Mm-hmm.
So that is great. 28 participants are online. To save time as we go through, once again, if you can rename yourself to let us know your pronouns and what camp you're with, and that way for our tracking we can track where we are at. And if you don't know how to rename yourself, I think it's just right-click on yourself and choose rename. That is great. That goes for the people whose video is off too. We'd still like to know where you're coming from, so that would be great. Perfect. I didn't put this on the notes, but can we have someone volunteer to start us off in a word of prayer? Any volunteers? If not, I'm ready for it because that's who I am. So if we could all get into our comfy prayer positions. Hey, God, thank you so much for being here with us where we are, for being the sounds we hear and the light we feel, and for bringing our hearts fully to this conversation as we get ready for another wonderful year of being part of the United Church of Canada's camping network. Please help us to open our hearts as we discuss what is best for camp and camping and for your power and your will. In your son's name we pray. Amen. Awesome. We're starting today off with Small Talk by Mary Smiley. Vicki, did you want to do any intro?
Maybe just like a quick word. Is that okay? I don't have a specific intro for Mary or anything like that. We've met through involvement in the Treaty Land Sharing Network, which is an organization that's relatively new, and Mary's going to talk about that I think is mostly in Saskatchewan. Again, Mary's going to talk about it. But the reason I asked Mary to join us is because folks at the last call said they're interested in talking more about what camps are doing and can do around reconciliation. And so this is a small piece of what the camp I'm involved in, it's called Lumsden Beach Camp in sort of southern Saskatchewan. One piece of the work we're doing, which is trying to work with Indigenous folks to allow them and invite them, welcome them, encourage them to use our land however they see fit. So Mary will talk more about the network, and maybe there's places, there's networks or similar organizations in your own provinces or your own places that you work out of, or maybe that's something that your camp could look at starting. Who knows? So Mary is calling from Bladsworth. She can introduce herself better, I think, than I certainly can. But thanks so much for being here, Mary.
Oh, thanks for having me. I am just so overjoyed that the United Church of Canada still has such a large camp opportunity. So I am a nurse by training, a farmer by marriage, and I am a cradle United Churcher who went to a number of different church camps growing up. My sisters were camp counselors, and church camps were very important to us. So I'm really happy to be here tonight, and thanks for the invitation. I will get through the nuts and bolts of what the Treaty Land Sharing Network is and what we're about, and then we'll open it up for conversation, because I think there is tremendous potential for something akin to what we're doing, or something even bigger than what we're doing, and how camps might play a role there. So I think I'm going to share my screen. It's been disabled. So if the host could enable me, that would be great. There we go. And then, okay, good. I can't always find what I'm looking for when this part. Okay, I have to get rid of this. Sorry. And there we go. All right, there's only a few slides. Can everybody see that all right?
How does it work?
You're probably all muted. So somebody tell me whether you can see that screen.
Looks great.
Great, thank you. So I am one of 7 women. We've now grown to 10 women who are the coordinating committee for the Treaty Land Sharing Network. My husband and I are, and our adult children operate a mixed grain and livestock farm. So that means that we grow crops as well as we have cattle, goats, and sheep. This picture is actually taken at the launch of the Treaty Land Sharing Network. Vicki, I think you were there. So this is at our farm here in Bladworth with our trampoline in the background there. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the First Peoples on the lands that we live and farm. We are located in Treaty 4, the ancestral lands of the Anishinaabe, the Nahiawak, the Stoney, Nakota, Lakota, Dakota, and homeland of the Métis. And we have been prospering on these lands that aren't really ours to have exclusive access to. And we are also very close to the border of Treaty 6, so which is north of us. So that takes in the city of Saskatoon and areas surrounding. And Treaty 4 is Regina, just to locate folks that aren't necessarily in Saskatchewan, what Treaty 4 and Treaty 6 are. So the Treaty Land Sharing Network is a project aimed at recognizing the land and territories of First Nations and Métis people in practice. Essentially, the basis of our work is land acknowledgement. So this photo, as I said, is from our public launch last summer, July 15th. And this was the culmination of 3 years of work and is at the same time just beginning. So a little bit more about it. It's a group, so the network is actually comprised of farmers, ranchers, and other people who hold title to land who want to honor treaties by sharing their land. And the key piece to this is providing safe access for Indigenous people to practice their way of life on lands that we farm. It's essentially honoring the relationship between settlers and Indigenous folks that was enshrined in treaty just about 150 years ago. It's also an effort to offer a different way forward for rural Saskatchewan. I'm going to say a little bit about the different way forward for rural Saskatchewan. As many of you are aware of, there was a death of a young Indigenous man by the name of Colton Bushy on the farm of a family near Bigger 5 years ago. And the farmer was, he was acquitted for all possible charges of assault or murder, which was just horrific in this province. You could hear a pin drop. The tension was so high. So the Treaty Land Sharing Network actually came as, in part, a counterpoint to the racist undertow that was prevalent in rural Saskatchewan, all over Saskatchewan, but particularly rural Saskatchewan. So anyway, back to what we mean by treaties, because I don't know where all of you are coming to us from, but the numbered treaties in Canada, which I mentioned, we are at 4 and 6, they were relationships among nations, including non-humans. They were frameworks that can guide us over time and meant to be renewed and reaffirmed. And sharing land for the mutual benefit and coexistence is inherent in the expectations and the writings of treaties at the time that they were created. And they denote a number of rights, responsibilities, and commitments on all parties. So treaties are not intended to establish a static set of terms that would be fixed in time, but to provide a framework that is dynamic, relational, and contextual, and that could guide the interactions of treaty partners over time. Treaties as legal and political frameworks are intended to govern the coexistence of various communities in shared space. And to Indigenous people, treaties were regarded as land use frameworks, which generally involve the establishment of separate governments and jurisdictions in distinct places, and dual governance and jurisdictions in shared spaces and matters of mutual concern. And I'm not sure how far and wide this idea is, but this is an idea in Saskatchewan where we're trying to grow to say we are all treaty people, because as settlers, it was our ancestors that were representing us at these treaty talks. So why do we need a treaty land sharing network? It's because treaty and inherent rights for Indigenous people are increasingly difficult to exercise. And as signatories to the treaties, we understand Indigenous people hold both inherent and treaty rights to move freely throughout these territories and to use and steward the plants and animals in these lands. And as you can see on my screen, it's getting harder and harder for Indigenous folks to have any access to, whether it's public lands, because so much of it has become privately owned. And then, as I spoke earlier about the rural racism and the trespassing legislation, Gerald Stanley was acquitted, and shortly thereafter, the Saskatchewan Rural Municipalities Organization, which is all the sort of the rural county councils, if you will, they petitioned government to put trespassing legislation in place to make it even harder for, now that they don't name that the intent was to make it harder for Indigenous folks to access land. But one of the outcomes of this is it makes it really that much harder for Indigenous folks to access land. So the Treaty Land Sharing Network exists as a counterpoint to that. How does it work? So those of us that have the privilege of holding title to land, we go on the website and we say, I would like to put our land in, and I would agree to the vision, mission, and values of the Treaty Land Sharing Network. And then an Indigenous land user would come to this side of our website, and that person would indicate that they're an Indigenous land user. They understand what the land protocols are. So land access is by foot only. Gates and fences must be left as they are found. Open fires are not permitted unless agreed upon in advance. You agree to that. And then you go into the website and you find locations in Treaty 4, for example. And so you might be interested in sage, in wild sage. And so then you'd go find the wild sage or the medicinal plants or whatever that you're looking for. And you would check out a little bit more information about that particular land holding and what you might find there. And then underneath here, you can't see it, but the contact would be the name of the person and the phone number that they could be communicated with, because there's no other way to find this land that's been set aside unless you call the landholder. And the intent is not to create a barrier, but it's to ensure safety for all parties, so that the people who hold title to land can know that, for example, if our cattle are out and people want to hunt, for example, we would let them know, well, you're more than welcome to come hunt, but the cattle are fenced there. So you might want to go over here if you're coming to hunt, probably with berries or collecting medicines. There wouldn't be an issue with the cattle being there. So it's just about having a mutual sort of understanding of what the risks are. So then this is the page. If I were to be wanting to sign up my land, I would put it in this format. And then there's a follow-up. We really are really keen that people are able to say yes to our vision, mission, and values. And the key pieces of our vision, mission, and values is essentially that we're trying to honor the treaties as treaties were intended to share the land. So we're committed to that. And we're also committed as settlers to undo a lot of the colonization problems that have existed for so long. And part of that is by educating ourselves on what is the shared history of our peoples through time in Canada and how we could right the wrongs of colonialism. So, yeah. So then there's some key milestones. This is also the press conference the same day. That's me holding the bolts. That's my husband with the hat, putting the bolts in the sign. And then the woman in the orange t-shirt is Commissioner Mary Culbertson, and she is the treaty commissioner here in Saskatchewan. And I believe there is somewhat of a similar role in Alberta. If there isn't, then there's going to be soon. There's kind of talk. I'm not really sure what that's at. And to answer Vicky's question, we currently only operate in Saskatchewan, but there's been interest expressed to us from folks in Alberta and Manitoba and as far as Ontario. And mostly we are just saying, put together a proposal. There was 3 years of deep consultation before we got to this point. And we really think that folks need to spend that time in consulting and in really understanding their context, both in terms of a social context as well as political and legal context for doing something similar. So my hunch is that in Alberta, you'll see expansion of this treaty land sharing network in the next couple of years anyway. So yeah, that's essentially the other thing I forgot to tell you about the woman in the orange t-shirt. We created a partnership between the Treaty Land Sharing Network and the Office of the Treaty Commissioner in 2020, and it's been a fabulous partnership. And the fellow sitting there is an Indigenous land user, and he raised 4 kids on hunting. And if you go to we had a ton of press for this this launch. We had 80 people at our farm for the event, and then we had another 30 people from the press. So yeah, you can Google Treaty Land Sharing Network and you'll see lots of different press. Anyway, what this fellow, the Indigenous land user, kept saying over, I can't believe this is happening. I really can't believe settlers are willing to share their land. And it was very kind of him to be so gracious about it. But yeah. So, but I just want to say one other little bit about camps and the possibility of camps. I don't know whether maybe you've already talked about this, because I'm new to your little group, so I don't know. So I'm a nurse by training, as I said, and I was invited a few years back to the to do some work with the Northwest Territories. And so my work was I have to get the gallery up so I can see you. My work was to work with the leadership of a health and social services entity. It was called Sawtoo Health and Social Services. And they wanted me to visit these 5 very remote, only fly-in communities in the Northwest Territories to learn more about how we could improve the home care system, the diabetes care system, and mental health and addictions. Like, it wasn't a small order, but I would go to all these communities. There's 5 of them. And I'm not very shy, so I would just start asking people, how can we improve home care, mental health and addictions, and diabetes care? And they would say, we need more on the land programs. At first, I thought they didn't understand my question. And then I realized I didn't understand their answer. And the answer was really truly was out on the land, 2 weeks out on the land. And what I came to understand, it was culture camp, it was pride camp, it was just coming in relationship and honoring a culture that had been so decimated for so long. Anyway, so that was like 2014, maybe 2015, when I first, and I used to go up like every winter and sort of do a follow-up on the work that we were doing there. And by 2020, they only had like 1 or 2 on the land programs. And of course, I had no mechanisms within the health and social services sector to fund more on the land programs, right? I had funding for more nurses, all these other things, but not on the land programs. But the good news is they managed to find a lot of funding for on the land programs, such that there's now a university in the Northwest Territories of on the land programs. And I think that's the key. And I've been hoping, I know, I'm confident that the Treaty Land Sharing Network will play a role in this as well. But I was at Pigeon Lake in Alberta this last September, and there is a CGIT camp there that I know is regularly rented out by Indigenous organizations that are wanting to do on the land programs. And I just think that is a fabulous fit. So that's enough from me.
Thanks so much, Mary.
Welcome your questions.
Yeah, does anybody have any questions for Mary? She'll stick around to answer them, and as long as it makes sense for her to be here, she said. So I can't see everybody, so just unmute if you would like to ask anything, or like if you have comments or things to share that your camp is doing in this vein.
I have a bit of a comment. A couple of years ago, just before COVID hit, I had been in working with a First Nations individual close to our camp here in Ontario, close to Lambton Centre, who wanted to set up a space to have a sweat lodge and do some cultural stuff with camp. And we did do some cultural stuff with camp, and then with COVID, it got harder to do. We never did get a chance. We built the sweat lodge, but never had to do that. But listening to that, I could certainly see opportunities where working with our local First Nations community to offer opportunities for ceremonies or even to run programs like on the land programs with groups from there. So that's very interesting. And
from my experience, you will have no regret. No regret. It is such an incredible opportunity.
And I'll share, Rick, the other, like a side benefit or a side relationship that's been built through the network is also we have artists in residence, and our artists in residence, one of our artists this year was an Indigenous woman who's involved in the network as well. And like there's all these cross pollinations, and now there's a group of artists and a group of Indigenous artists and settler artists who are putting together a whole sort of like healing art creation retreat around land-based creation. Anyway, so there's all sorts of things that can happen if you let them, so getting involved, if there are networks or ways to reach out, I think it's only good things for camps.
This is
I had a question. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
I was just going to say, this is a very timely topic for me. We're preparing for our annual general meeting in just a week and a half, and I'm still building the agenda and trying to create a topic that will actually have people come to our AGM. And so I've reached out, and actually just tomorrow afternoon I have a conversation with the elder through our local area to talk about what might a topic be, or how might we approach this at an AGM, just to start talking about what could camp do. One thought I would love to see even OMI approach is with our national church to say, what about establishing a fund that could support Indigenous youth to come to camp? So a designated across Canada, any Indigenous youth supported to come to camp. Lots and lots of ideas above and beyond that. My husband grew up in Ontario and worked at the camp that originally housed the collection that is now the Canadian Canoe Museum. And the Canadian Canoe Museum has a neat project of using canoe as a place of connection for reconciliation. And if you go to their website, they've got some neat videos, and in particular a video of it's about 6 or 7 minutes long, that shows the faces of diversity of people that they took on a canoe trip to talk about reconciliation and relationship and that sort of thing as well. So I'm thinking I might integrate that in for that, but very timely, and I'd love to hear more ideas. So Jory, over to you.
Thank you. Mary, thanks so much for sharing this with us. I think that's an incredible amount of work and effort that you've put into something that I can tell you're very passionate about. And I already learned some things just by listening to you. And I think the work you did up north is fascinating. My question was, do you have best practices or thoughts, any things that have come along in regards to a property that has no physical boundary to mark its borders, and the potential of overlap of activities if people are being invited onto our property to participate in traditional activities, the potential of them ending up on property that maybe isn't as hospitable to their presence?
Okay, well, that's a great question. And I think the purpose of the network is really twofold. One is to create space for Indigenous land users to exercise their Indigenous rights. I think I'm quite confident that it will be mostly a symbolic effort from that point of view until there are more Indigenous folks that have the opportunity to become become trained to be able to learn more about their own culture. Like, we have done an amazing good job at cultural genocide. We really have. I can't take anything away from that. Anyway, but the other piece of posting that sign is to engage with your neighbors in a conversation. that we're not otherwise having. And even though there was gobs of Mary Smiley on the radio, Mary Smiley here, there, because I was the press, I was the go-to press thing. I only had one person in my community, and I live in a village of 67 people, and you know the commercial area has 1,000 people. And there was when I was in the grocery store, it was the tire guy that went like this, and he goes, "Ooh, radio girl." But I haven't had people coming up to me saying, "Tell me more about the Treaty Land Sharing Network." And I think that's our work. That's our main work right now. Is to invite people into a conversation that we wouldn't normally have. And I know as United Churchers, you're all really good at that. And the other piece that is just another little storyline. So instead of waiting for people to ask me about it, I just started saying, like, if they said, "How's your summer been?" I'd say, "Well, we had a lot of people in Bladworth." And so this one fellow who I'm in the parts department at the Case dealership in Davidson, and he was the MLA for this area for the Sask Party for 20 years. And I had said that, I've been kind of busy in Bladworth lately. And he said, "Yeah, about that. You tell them. If there's anybody hunting on your land and the moose cross onto my land, you just tell them. Go ahead. Keep hunting." I said, "That's great, Greg." I said, "Can I get you a sign?" "No, don't want any signs, but they can keep hunting." So Greg and I do not share any political, ideological commonplace other than we are neighbors. And so what my takeaway from this and my response to your question, Jory, is go ahead and post. Go ahead and tell your neighbors that you're going to post this. This is what it means. This is what you're trying to do. And my experience is there's a lot of people that are willing to go with you, particularly if you're already in a relationship with them.
Awesome. Any other questions for Mary?
If I could leave you with one other thing that I've come to understand is so critical, and you're going to know this, is to honor. It's a place of honoring. So I think the opportunity to learn more about your camp land and what it represented for Indigenous folks through time is only possible when you open up that camp land so that people can renew a relationship with that land that has been out of their context now for 150 years, right? So I got one more small story. So the year before the launch, we also had a land sharing event here at Bladworth. It was the beginning of the COVID lockdown. So we were always outside. We were always, being very careful. And so these land sharing events that have happened here in Bladworth have always involved a feast and a pipe ceremony. And the first time we had a pipe ceremony here, there was a fellow kind of doing color commentary, and he said, "You have to know, this is really extraordinary that we are doing one of our ceremonies on farmland at Bladworth." And I go, wow, that is so easy to do, right? That's just being neighbors, right? Anyway, so there's about 40 people in this first event. And so Ian and I picked a really tiny pasture. Like for us, a tiny pasture is 20 acres. We have a lot of land. And this is just a tiny one where we take our cull cows to. And it was a very windy day. So we got these 40 people all to drive just a mile away. And we had an Indigenous elder and his mother and grandmother who were our knowledge keepers about medicinal plants and land and what it meant for Indigenous folks. And he said, go walk around and then come back to this little copse of trees. And so anyway, we did that and we came back, and he and his mother and his grandmother in the span of about 40 minutes had identified between 30 and 40 plants of medicinal or spiritual value to the Indigenous folks. And Ian and I, without that experience, would never have looked at that little copse of trees in any way as being special. So if you can get this, it's about building relationships through land by sharing land. And you have land.
Megan, you put a question in the chat, but I think it just went to me. Did you mean to ask that to everybody? Nope. Okay, great. We'll talk later. Oh, sorry. Thanks, Mary. I appreciate that. Does anybody else have any other comments or questions before Joe moves us along his agenda? Awesome. So hopefully I'll just say, I hope that starts percolating for folks. And I can say I was involved in the network sort of right in the early days. And the thing that I thought was so neat was we did a gathering of just settler people, even though the idea came from Indigenous folks and settler people, to do our own work and our own education before it sort of kept growing and transforming, because it's not Indigenous folks' job to educate us on treaties. We should know that we're treaty people. So I encourage you to maybe do that even among camps in your region or churches or anything to start that work. And I'll stop talking because my kid is pulling my thumbs. But thanks again, Mary. And yeah,
it's been a pleasure.
Yeah,
it's been a real pleasure.
Being here.
Good luck. Nice to meet you all.
It was awesome. Thanks so much, Mary.
You're so welcome. Bye for now.
That is great. We have a lot to learn as settlers and a lot to unlearn. And so that is, all of these are just small blocks of building back. We're going to move on to topic number 2, summer of 2022, COVID practices for staff members and campers. This comes out, we had a gathering in November, Think Camp, the OMI gathering happened here at Pierce Williams. And one of the topics that came up was what our policies would be for the summer of 2022. One person brought up the fact that they had already made the choice to say that all summer staff would need to be vaccinated and all kids would need to be vaccinated. And that sort of sparked a conversation with a lot of us about it's easier to implement that now and then backtrack a little bit if things change than it would be to implement vaccine mandates closer to the date if things don't change. So it's an open conversation. What questions do people have? Where do we want to go with this? And how do you see your own camp running the most normal summer possible? Feel free to open up your mic and chat.
I just had this conversation with my board last week, and I was surprised that there wasn't sort of, for me, it seemed like a no-brainer thing. I just assumed we wouldn't quite require everybody to be vaccinated. But then one of the other questions that came up with summer camps, that's probably doable, and I suspect, like you say, Joe, it's easier to backtrack, ease up on things, and try to implement more things. But then the question came up about outdoor education school groups, because I know schools in Ontario here are not requiring that all the students have to be vaccinated. And this is assuming that we can do school groups in the spring. But I'm not sure whether anybody sort of thought about that, how that would be different for rental groups as opposed to summer camp. Thoughts?
We've actually discussed and just passed a policy that in looking at risk management and safety and protecting staff and every single camper that comes to camp, at this point, we've decided that every camper must come with a negative test that is notarized by a health professional. So we're looking at every camper required, and no older than 48 hours, although we were even nervous with that and suggesting perhaps it should be no older than 24 hours. But that might change. But our thought was, rather than require vaccination, we just want to know that every camper coming at that point in time is as close to assurance that they're healthy and not infected, rather than have to track vaccination status. We do have a policy that everybody who is either a volunteer or on staff must be vaccinated. And then whether they're going to have to do those tests or not, it might mean that families are having to pay $20 or $30 for a rapid test at the pharmacy ahead of camp, but it's bringing to us that assurance. Now, the rapid test procedures and availability might change that, and maybe we'll do rapid tests on site and give the 15 minutes to wait and feel, but at this point we've decided that it's showing up with a rapid test that says, or a test that shows assurance, whether you're vaccinated or not, that you are free of COVID.
I think that's a wise decision is to make sure that your staff are vaccinated and volunteers are vaccinated. But as far as the kids themselves, if they are all given a rapid test upon arrival and then wait the 15 minutes until you get a test result before you allow them to go to step 2 of the registration would make a lot of sense. Currently, right now in Alberta, I think there's only 35% of the kids between 5 and 11 that have started the vaccination process. So we've got a long ways to go from there. This to me is getting to that point it's kind of nice to think about those things, because I see so much a lot of heartache and big decisions and processes before we can even get to such a point as to say, yes, we're having a camp. And that's the scary thing right now. And right now is who knows what's going to come down the pike. Back in the end of November, I mean, who had even heard of Omicron, So it's things are changing so fast. I did have a question. One of the sources we had this is kind of a little off topic, but we have been engaging a program called ASEC through the UN, which involves international students coming in to work for up to 6 to 8 weeks for you in the summer. And we had four young people join us in 2019. It was great, and it got shut down immediately in the beginning of 2020, and just want to know if anybody had engaged that group to see what their feelings are on that process, or whether anybody even knows about that. So. Anyone?
Could you tell us more about the program?
Oh, certainly. Actually, it's the program is called AIESEC. That's the acronym, and it is operated through the United Nations. It involves high schools. It involves high school graduates and university undergraduates and whatnot in the process of going to school. They arrive on site to do whatever particular jobs. They go through an application process. You interview them online, and in 2019, for example, we had 2 young women who came to us from Mexico. We had a young man from Spain, and then we had another young woman from Korea. And it was I don't know whether it was just beginner's luck, but it worked out absolutely fantastic. And they really enjoyed being here. The processing costs for all that staff, they provided the transportation. We had to provide the transportation from Edmonton, which is where the point of entry, to the camp itself. And they essentially were on their own on the weekends if they chose to. But the only cost that was incurred was $400 per person for that placement. That was the administration fee. That was it. The program pays for everything. And
Can you send us out? Can you send us out any information you have, Jim? I don't know.
I certainly will. I'm really surprised no one's ever actually heard of it.
I think that takes us a bit off topic, and I'd rather get back to.
Oh, I hear you. Yes.
If people think that, so if camp is going to happen this summer, are vaccines? Yeah. Do you just mandate it from now? And is that going to help? Is that going to if 80% of our population is vaccinated in this country, of adults, then would that also indicate that those adults would like their kids' safety to be first at heart as well?
I think if we asked for proof of a vaccination for the kids, or asked them to do a 15-minute rapid test, I think it's a PCR or whatever test it is. I think asking children or asking parents to have that for their kids might be a bit of a hard sell right now. In the province of Alberta, it is one of the most difficult things to get the full grade PCR test right now, unless you are in a high risk group or in a high risk employment group, like let's say first responders or hospitals. If you're somebody who's just suffering from, if you've got a cold or you came in contact with somebody who tested positive, that is not criteria to get the PCR test right now in Alberta. They're making it more and more difficult to get those tests, and it's next to impossible to even get the rapid test. Although the County of St. Paul, which is the overriding government body in our area, have provided us and are willing to provide us with rapid tests. Whether or not, because I could see us needing, let's say, upwards of 100 of them, which isn't out of the ordinary, but we'd have to plan ahead to do that. But as far as asking people for a PCR test, I think that's a bit unreasonable. But asking for vaccination or a rapid test is probably, maybe the best practice, and maybe the only thing that saves us, allows us to actually have a camp and safely.
I can follow up a little bit. I'm with Camp Whitney along with Jim, and we get our health rapid tests through the health services branch. Through the college has a pickup point, and right now we have 150 plus or minus a couple rapid tests on site, and as long as you give them a week's notice, they'll through your local health department in your county or community, they have programs. So we're kind of stockpiling, getting ready for if we do have a camp, and then we'll have enough, because I'm sure there'll be a big rush come on here in the spring when other organizations start opening it up. So maybe now would be a good time for people to look into that, because I'm sure there's a flood coming.
In Ontario this past summer, when we ran camps, we were able to get rapid tests through the Chamber of Commerce, and it didn't cost us anything. And as far as I know, I believe that program is being extended until May. So just before Christmas, I picked up another 100 rapid tests, but that's something that might be able to get connected with for camps that are in Ontario anyways.
And some of these rapid tests, depending on which brand you get, there's actually a shelf life of, I think the maximum of 3 months. So you'll have to kind of keep that in mind in your planning as well.
Rick, did you use those for campers or just staff?
We used them just for staff last summer. We test all the staff every week.
At Minnesota, we had the same thing from the Chamber of Commerce, and we did it with all of our campers. So we used about 400 tests over the course of the summer.
But I recently got an email from our Chamber of Commerce that if you're taking tests from them, you have to sign an affidavit, essentially, that says they're only being used for your staff.
So initially that was the case with our Chamber of Commerce as well, and we were just using them from the staff, and we had a different source from Ontario who was providing them for our campers. And then we got a notice from our Chamber of Commerce that said, if you're ordering them from 2 places and reporting to 2 places, let's make it easy and just order them from us. So they told us we could do that.
Yeah, the most recent note I think was to do with a shortage of rapid tests in Ontario right now. So.
Any particular training or protocols that you have in place for staff administering those tests? Because we're trying to avoid that by asking families to bring a negative test that's notarized by a health official, as opposed to the just did it at home kind of thing. Really, the rapid test on site might be the absolute greatest assurance as compared to a 48-hour old one. Yeah. But what training or protocols did you have to do to have staff administering? And did you have any pushback from families about how that was conducted?
What we do at Camp Whitney is when someone comes out, there's very self-explanatory and very easy to use. So we have a little table set up and they give themselves the test. And then they sit over in the waiting area. And then when the little strip comes back, positive or negative, then they can go to the next area and enjoy camp. So it's pretty much something where there's no training. It's really simple.
Yeah, I would echo that. It was pretty hard to get it wrong. If you did it wrong, it would give like an invalid, and you'd just do another rep test. And we were a little bit hardcore in the sense that we had all of our campers do PCR tests as well, and then rapid tested them when they arrived at camp. So we had covered them both ways. Though this summer we are really considering whether we're going to go the vaccinated route, as PCR tests are becoming very hard to come by. We have decided that we're going to make all of our staff and volunteers get their vaccinations, but haven't yet decided for the campers. And we have, in terms of the question about pushback, we certainly had every week, we'd have 2 to 3 parents who would be like, oh, I didn't realize we were doing the testing. I am philosophically against this, and they would pull out of camp. And that would be a reality for us. And I would expect the same from any kind of vaccination protocol. It's a sacrifice, I suppose.
So do you test all your volunteers and workers and the kids, or just the kids, and you don't test the vaccinated?
We're not sure what we're going to do this coming summer, but this last summer, we tested everyone, including all the staff who were vaccinated. We did the bi-weekly rapid tests for all the staff.
There was no pushback from volunteers or staff. They were fine with taking the tests like that?
Yeah, we just told them this is how it is, and everyone there seemed to go through it. It's not very painful. It's pretty painless.
I think we're going to be implementing some type of a system, so we're just kind of trying to take as much feedback from everybody else right now.
I think with the amount of breakthrough on vaccinated people showing positive, even with Omicron, I think we really have to look a little differently at it than we did last year with the Delta variant.
I think maybe a good practice with this new variant might be to test everybody, employees, volunteers, everyone that comes on site. That way you have a clear shot of health for everyone through the gates, kind of thing.
Because even a negative COVID at day of registration, if they had contact the day before or even 2 days before, could easily show positive 2 days into camp. That's going to be the complicated part.
Yeah, has anyone thought of doing like testing at day 1 and then testing at day, say, 3? Has anyone done any protocols like that, just to perhaps catch any type of any symptoms that snuck through like that?
I think the challenge would be is if you had somebody that was tested positive in day 3, the way Omicron is going, then you have an infected camp. Everybody's got it. It sounds like it goes that fast.
Would that be something that would be a good protocol, though, so we could shut it down and stop? Maybe only half of that camp got it after day 3, or would you just say once they test good, they can come through and we don't test again until the next bunch of kids come in?
You're looking at, sorry, can I get in here, Joe? You're looking at that most health units will say that as soon as you have more than 2 people showing symptoms, you've got an outbreak and your facility has to be shut down.
Yeah.
In Ontario, anyway.
Yeah.
True. Yeah.
Because we're really, really, every year we're so tight on staff. We're like, our camp basically hinges on how many staff members we have. So if we lost a couple staff members to an outbreak, that would affect probably the rest of the camp. So.
Well, and that might be a good transition to the idea of where we're at on staffing, right? There's so much. I think that we all need to be in our COVID pandemic ignorance place, because we simply don't know what's going to happen over the next 5 months. Like, we don't know if the next variant is going to arrive by then, and if your province is going to lift the restrictions they've put on summer camps or the guidelines they've put on. So I think it's all playing it by ear. But the one thought is, we don't have a lot of time, but the thought is, how is staffing? How are we feeling about staffing our summer camps? And does anybody have strategies that they're implementing to make sure they have the staff for the number of campers are going to take?
This year, Camp Whitney is going to try and address junior high and the high school, and we're going to see if we can find some interest in there and try and get some local younger people to come out, whether it's a junior counselor or just try and find some counselors and some staff through them. But then, like Jim was talking of earlier, we do the overseas program, which works out really good if that's what that's what it comes down to, I guess. But yeah, just trying to reintegrate the youth and the community of where we came from before, and see if we can find some kids in the school that we're interested in, perhaps just being counselors, junior counselors, maintenance people. Just trying to keep it in the community and let our circle around camp kind of grow within the community.
As far as that international youth employment that was shared with us, I'm familiar that lots and lots of other camps, ski hills, all kinds of other facilities recruit staff, international students through that. So I'm sure some of the neighboring United Church camps, as far as I know, don't typically tend to use that as much, because we're cautious about our theology and wanting to make sure we engage people that align well with our missions and that sort of thing. But and not to say that every youth that enters or applies for that is not suitable, right? So it's a case of finding them. So I think it is a resource that we as United Church camps haven't tapped into, but other camps certainly do. I know some summer camps that the only people they hire for the summer come from there, and from England, and lots from Africa and places like that as well. Mexico is really popular.
Oh, I agree. It's been a great system, but when we posted the positions on the internet, the people who were applying it were fully aware that it was that this was a church camp with an affiliation to a large denomination, and the majority, 3 of the 4, had strong religious backgrounds already, and that worked out well, actually. And I think there's, as we get to places like Mexico and Spain, you probably find a slightly higher number of kids who are more, I would say, have a stronger religious tradition than even our local kids. But at the same time, we still need to hire local kids as well if we can. It's a tough sell in this neck of the woods. We're kind of the nearest city or the nearest town is only about 12 miles away, and we've got a very small labor force that we're drawing on. But finding people who are interested and want to be engaged in the church camp was a bit easier than we had thought. I mean, I think there was, when we had before the program shut down in 2020, I think there was about 20 people that had actually applied to the position, or to the positions that we had. It was quite good. But I think right now, this is the time that if the program is indeed up and running right now, then this is around the time that they will start, they will start getting up applications. I think we started in early February in 2020 and also in 2019. So it's one of those things, you got to hit it now. So
I wonder what type of regulations they'd have for when they come into Canada, the quarantines and stuff like that with the new international travel. Other than that, I think that might be a little different compared to when we had it, but
Yeah.
I'll just share a little tip as someone who works in a high school. Sorry, Joe. Do you want to go?
Go ahead.
Yeah. So if you're looking to recruit high school students, I know here in Ontario, all of our schools are online right now. Most schools now will have something called a school messenger. So I would usually post ads like onto the announcements at the school kind of thing by messaging the head secretary. But now if you request that they'll send it out in Messenger, I've gotten a bunch of secretaries to actually send out a blast, for example, to all their grade 12 students that says, here's a job opportunity in your area. And there's the information. So most schools these days will have some kind of school messenger system in addition to the announcements. So I thought I'd throw that out there.
That's a great suggestion. Being conscious of the time, I wanted to offer two people some opportunities to speak to us briefly. Doug, did you want to speak briefly about the opportunity that you have available at Big Canoe?
Yeah, I was going to say that with staffing, we actually haven't had a big problem. We're getting a not bad response to our staffing, and actually some senior, like who've been there 3 or 4 or 5 years, have applied to come back as assistant directors, because those kind of leadership, so that we're strong there. But then, yeah, Steve Salt, for those who don't know, has gone back to teaching. So we're looking for an executive director. We have a handful of pretty decent candidates, and we're going to start interviewing later this week. I guess if anybody knows anybody who's really interested, and they can contact me. Probably the easiest way is just at board@campbigcanoe.ca. So if anyone's has moved to Ontario, left your camp, whatever, and looking for thinking that they might make a good leader of a camp, then let me know. Yeah, so it's kind of a awkward time to be switching directors, but we're pretty positive about it. So yeah, that's where we are right now.
Do you have a job posting up, Doug, on the website?
It was on the OCA website until Friday.
Okay, great. You can always email Doug at board@bigcanoe.ca. Awesome. Vicki Nelson has something she would like to share with us.
Yeah, so my computer is really glitchy. I hope I'm not, but I just wanted to share an opportunity for camps that's coming up through the United Church in March. So I am serving as a stewardship animator for the United Church. I actually did the same thing as Steve. I left my role as executive director with my camp last month. So, but I still love camps, and that's why I'm here. So what I do is I help mostly congregational communities of faith, but also community ministries, camps, chaplaincies, etc. Build skills around stewardship. So relationship building with the people that financially support your ministry. And I do these trainings. It's called to be the church. It's sort of borrowed from a congregational mod. Anyways, point is, if this is something that you or members of your board or folks on your fundraising committee or whatever would be interested in, there is a session coming up starting on March 4th, which is a Friday. And it's that Friday and 2 more Fridays for 2 hours. So it's a 6-hour commitment, but it's pretty good. And I keep it relatively small. So there'll be sort of a group of maybe 4 or 5 organizations, 3 to 5 organizations, where we really dig into some sort of best practices around donor invitation and gratitude and donor retention and sharing your impact and that kind of stuff. So if that's an area that your camp could use like a little boost with, or even if you're really, really good at that already and want to share with other organizations, please email me to sign up. I'm going to put my email address into the chat right now, and yeah, it'll be fun. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I want to acknowledge that we are at our time. Don't mind my 6-week cough. I'm hoping it doesn't go to 7. We're at our time. This recording will be up. I also want to recognize that this is one of our first meetings where we've had all 4 of the current coordinators, although Vicky is leaving us. So I want to acknowledge Janice, Vicky, and Claire as well as we move into year 2 of the grant for the Outdoor Ministries Network. Before we go, I would like you all to type something into the chat when I ask the question, but don't hit send until I say. The question is, what do you need most from Outdoor Ministries Institute this year? What is the one thing that you need most from OMI to help you get through 2022? Hopefully a better year than 2020 and 2021. But who knows? It could all go downhill too. So I set low expectations. But what do you need most from OMI? Type it in. Don't hit send. I'll tell you when to hit send. And so I'm waiting for everybody to type in, and you can hit send now, and then we can read the waterfall. So guidance and support, information sharing, connection and encouragement, COVID guidelines, connection, best practices, a national gathering. Yes, that is in the works. Connections, yes. Opportunities. What I'm going to do for everyone is this recording is going to be posted to YouTube over the next couple of days on the Outdoor Ministries channel. I will copy the notes from the chat and put them into YouTube. If you directly message me, I don't know that will show up, but I will edit it. So we'll go from there.